Laura Nichols had perfected the art of the pitch, her voice steady and confident as she presented Hartman Publishing's latest proposal to a room full of skeptical board members who questioned every statistic she cited. The mahogany conference table gleamed under fluorescent lights, reflecting the faces of 12 executives who held her company's future in their hands. She had worked 3 months preparing this presentation, knowing that landing the Anderson Media account would secure her position as senior marketing director and prove to everyone at Hartman Publishing that she belonged at the top. When the meeting ended, the chairman offered a non-committal handshake and promised to review her materials. Laura gathered her laptop and folders, maintaining her professional composure despite the disappointment settling in her chest. She knew that tone, recognized the polite dismissal masked as consideration. Walking through the building's marble lobby, she checked her phone and found 7 missed calls from her boss, Gregory Hartman himself. The cab ride back to the office felt longer than usual. Chicago's afternoon traffic crawled along Michigan Avenue, giving her too much time to replay every moment of the presentation. She had been flawless, she knew it. Her data was impeccable, her creative concepts innovative and fresh. Yet something had been missing, some spark that would have pushed them from interested to committed. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Maya. "Coffee after work. You look like you need it based on your stress texting at 3 a.m. Laura smiled despite her anxiety and typed back a quick yes. Maya worked as a graphic designer for a small boutique firm and had been her anchor since college. They had met during freshman orientation, 2 lost girls from small towns trying to navigate the overwhelming chaos of university life in a big city. 10 years later, they still met every Thursday for coffee and complaints. The Hartman Publishing building rose 30 stories above the Chicago skyline, a glass and steel monument to old money and older traditions. Gregory Hartman's grandfather had founded the company in 1952, starting with a single printing press and a dream of bringing quality literature to the masses. Now, they published everything from best-selling novels to trade magazines, competing with digital giants and struggling to maintain relevance in an industry that changed faster than they could adapt. Laura's office was a small space on the 23rd floor, barely large enough for her desk and 2 chairs, but it had a window. That window represented 5 years of hard work, countless late nights, and more rejected proposals than she cared to remember. She had started as an assistant, fetching coffee and making copies, proving herself one small task at a time until Gregory finally noticed her potential. "Laura, my office now." Gregory's voice crackled through her desk phone before she could even set down her bag. She took the elevator up 4 floors to the executive level, where the offices were twice the size, and the coffee was imported. Gregory's assistant waved her through without looking up from her computer. The corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a view that probably cost more per year than Laura's entire salary. Gregory sat behind his massive desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit custom-tailored. At 62, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. He looked up as she entered, his expression grave. "Close the door." Laura's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever followed those words. "The Anderson pitch?" he asked. "They said they would review and get back to us by Friday. They already called. We didn't get it." He leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that cost more than her first car. Hudson Enterprises submitted a proposal that blew ours out of the water, apparently. More innovative, more aggressive, better numbers. Laura felt the words like a physical blow. Hudson Enterprises. Their biggest competitor, led by a mysterious CEO who had transformed a failing publishing house into a multimedia empire in just 7 years. No one knew much about him, except that he was young, brilliant, and ruthless in business. Gregory despised him with the passion of a man watching his legacy crumble. "I worked so hard on that proposal," Laura said, hating how small her voice sounded. "I know you did. That's why I am sending you to the National Publishing Conference in New York next week. Hudson will be there, probably gloating about stealing another account. I want you to network, make connections, find out what they are doing that we are not. Can you do that?" "Of course." She straightened her shoulders, refusing to let defeat show on her face. "Good. Book your flight and hotel, take the corporate card, and Laura—" He fixed her with a stern look. "Do not let them intimidate you. You are one of the best marketers I have ever worked with. You just need to think bigger." The praise felt hollow after the rejection, but she nodded and left his office. Back at her desk, she opened her laptop and started researching the conference. 5 days in New York, hundreds of industry professionals, countless opportunities to make an impression. She could do this. She had to. That evening, she met Meyer at their usual coffee shop, a cozy place called Brewster's tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. The smell of fresh ground beans and cinnamon enveloped her as she walked in, immediately easing some of the tension from her shoulders. Maya was already seated at their corner table, 2 lattes waiting. She had bright red hair that she changed every few months, currently styled in a sleek bob. Her vintage dress and chunky jewelry made her look like she had stepped out of a 1960s fashion magazine. "That bad?" Meyer asked, sliding a latte across the table. "We lost the Anderson account to Hudson Enterprises." Laura wrapped her hands around the warm cup, absorbing its heat. "Gregory is sending me to New York to spy on the competition." "Spy, really?" "Network and learn from them officially." "But yes, basically spy." Laura took a long sip of her latte, savoring the perfect balance of espresso and steamed milk. "I just do not understand what I am doing wrong. My proposals are solid. My ideas are good, but we keep losing to Hudson." "Maybe they are just better," Maya said gently. "I know they are. That is what terrifies me." Laura stared out the window, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk. "What if I have reached my ceiling? What if this is as good as I get?" "Stop it. You are 28 years old and already a senior director at a major publishing house. You are not even close to your ceiling." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "This conference could be exactly what you need. New perspective, new contacts, new ideas." "You are right. I know you are right." Laura managed a smile. "Tell me about your day." "Did the brewery logo get approved?" Maya launched into a story about her demanding client who wanted a vintage feel, but also modern and edgy, but also classic. Her animated gestures nearly knocking over her coffee twice. Laura listened and laughed, grateful for the distraction, for the normalcy of friendship that had nothing to do with business or competition or failure. The following week passed in a blur of preparation. Laura researched Hudson Enterprises obsessively, trying to understand their strategy. They had started as a small literary press, focusing on debut authors and niche markets. Then, 7 years ago, new leadership had taken over and everything changed. They expanded into digital publishing, acquired several smaller companies, launched a successful audiobook division, and somehow managed to sign some of the biggest names in contemporary fiction. The CEO, Henry Isaacson, remained an enigma. There were no photos of him in trade publications, no interviews, no public appearances. He let his work speak for itself, which only added to his mystique. Some people called him a genius. Others said he was just lucky, riding the wave of digital transformation at exactly the right moment. Gregory called him a vulture, picking apart the traditional publishing industry for profit. Laura packed for New York on Sunday evening, carefully selecting outfits that projected confidence and competence. Professional but not stuffy, modern but not trendy. She wanted to blend in while standing out, a delicate balance that required 3 complete outfit changes before she was satisfied. The flight Monday morning was uneventful. She worked on her laptop the entire time, reviewing her presentation for a small panel discussion she had been invited to join. The topic was innovative marketing strategies in traditional publishing, and she had spent hours crafting talking points that were insightful without revealing any of Hartman's proprietary strategies. The hotel was in Midtown Manhattan, a sleek modern building with a lobby full of industry professionals checking in for the conference. Laura recognized several faces from trade magazines and LinkedIn profiles. She collected her room key and headed upstairs, already feeling the buzz of nervous energy that came with these events. The conference began Tuesday morning with a keynote speech from a best-selling author who talked about the changing relationship between writers and publishers. Laura took notes, networking during the breaks, handing out business cards and collecting them in return. Everyone was friendly in that superficial way of professional gatherings, smiling and exchanging pleasantries while mentally calculating whether the other person was worth their time. She attended panels on digital marketing, social media strategies, and emerging trends in reader engagement. The information was useful but not revolutionary. She kept looking for anyone from Hudson Enterprises, but their team seemed to be keeping a low profile. Wednesday evening, there was a cocktail reception in the hotel ballroom. Laura wore a black dress that Maya had insisted she buy, simple and elegant with just enough personality to avoid being boring. She arrived fashionably late, surveyed the room of networking professionals, and headed straight for the bar. "Whiskey sour, please," she told the bartender. "Make that 2, said a voice beside her. She turned and found herself looking at a man who definitely had not been at any of the panels she had attended. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and striking blue eyes that seemed to catch the light. His suit was perfectly tailored, expensive without being showy. He had the kind of presence that made people look twice, a quiet confidence that suggested he was used to being in charge. "I have not seen you at any of the sessions," Laura said, accepting her drink from the bartender. "I have been in private meetings most of the day." "First time I've come up for air." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and more approachable. "Henry Isaacson." Laura's hand froze halfway to her mouth, her whiskey sour suddenly forgotten. Henry Isaacson, CEO of Hudson Enterprises. The man whose company had been crushing Hartman Publishing for the past 2 years. The ruthless competitor Gregory had sent her here to investigate. "Laura Nichols," she managed, shaking his offered hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Hartman Publishing, right? I have seen your name on some impressive proposals." "You have seen my proposals." The words came out more surprised than she intended. "We compete for a lot of the same accounts. I make it a point to know who I am up against." He took a sip of his whiskey sour, studying her over the rim of his glass. "You are very good at what you do." "Not good enough, apparently. You seem to win most of those accounts." "Wins and losses are part of the business. Today's victory is tomorrow's mistake and vice versa." He gestured toward the crowded ballroom. "Want to escape this circus? There is a quieter bar downstairs." Every professional instinct told Laura this was exactly the opportunity Gregory had sent her here to find. A chance to talk with Henry Isaacson, to learn his strategies, to understand what made Hudson Enterprises so successful. But something else stirred in her chest as she looked at him, something that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the way he was looking at her. "Lead the way," she said. The hotel's lower-level bar was dimly lit and nearly empty, decorated in dark wood and leather with jazz playing softly in the background. They claimed a corner booth, and Laura found herself relaxing in a way she had not expected. This did not feel like a business meeting. It felt like two people having drinks, getting to know each other, testing the waters of potential connection. "So how did you end up at Hartman?" Henry asked, settling back against the leather seat. "Started as an assistant 5 years ago. Worked my way up through determination and stubbornness." Laura swirled her drink, watching the ice catch the low light. "What about you? You are something of a mystery in the industry." "I prefer it that way. Let the work speak instead of the personality." He met her eyes, and she felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the whiskey. "But since you asked, I bought Hudson Enterprises 7 years ago when it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Saw potential where everyone else saw failure. That must have been a huge risk. The biggest. But I have always believed that playing it safe is the fastest way to irrelevance." He leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something without it being weird?" "You can ask. I reserve the right to find it weird." He laughed, a genuine sound that made her smile. "Fair enough. What made you get into publishing? It is not exactly the most stable industry these days." Laura considered the question, appreciating that he had asked something real instead of sticking to safe small talk. "I grew up in a tiny town in Indiana. The library was my escape, my window to the world beyond cornfields and Friday night football games. I wanted to be part of creating those windows for other people. Books change lives. I know that sounds naive, but I still believe it." "It does not sound naive at all." Henry's expression softened. "It sounds passionate. That is rare in this business. Most people I meet are just chasing trends and profit margins." They talked for 2 hours, the conversation flowing easily from publishing to books they loved to places they had traveled to dreams they still wanted to pursue. Laura learned that Henry had grown up in Boston, the son of a high school English teacher and a nurse. He had put himself through business school working construction jobs and driving for a ride-share service. He loved old movies, good whiskey, and hiking in places where he could not get cell service. She told him about Maya and their Thursday coffee tradition, about her tiny apartment in Lincoln Park that cost too much, but had exposed brick walls, about her goal to one day publish a book that actually mattered instead of just chasing bestseller lists. "We should probably get back to the reception," Henry said finally, checking his watch. "People will think we got lost." "Or we could skip it entirely," Laura heard herself say. "There is a great Italian place a few blocks from here, best carbonara in Manhattan." He smiled that transformative smile again. "You are full of surprises, Laura Nichols." "Is that a yes?" "Absolutely." They walked through the cool New York evening, the city alive with lights and noise and endless energy. The restaurant was a small family-owned place tucked into a basement. Red checked tablecloths and candles in wine bottles, and the smell of garlic and fresh bread that made Laura's mouth water. Over pasta and red wine, their conversation deepened. They debated the future of print versus digital, argued about the best book to film adaptations, and discovered they had both read and loved an obscure memoir about a woman who had walked across Spain carrying nothing but a backpack and a notebook. "I read that book during the hardest year of my life," Henry said quietly. "When Hudson was failing and I was working 18-hour days and questioning every decision I had made. Something about her determination, her willingness to just keep walking even when she was lost, it gave me perspective." "What made you keep going?" Laura asked. "Stubbornness, mostly, and the belief that failure is only permanent if you stop trying." He met her eyes across the table. What about you? What keeps you going when things get hard, honestly? Fear of proving everyone right who said I would not make it. I came from nothing, worked for everything, and I refused to give people the satisfaction of watching me fail. She paused, surprised by her own honesty. That probably sounds terrible. It sounds human. Henry reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. For what it is worth, I do not think you are going to fail. They lingered over dessert, neither wanting the evening to end. When they finally left the restaurant, it was past 11. Henry walked her back to the hotel, their shoulders occasionally brushing, creating tiny moments of contact that felt significant in the hotel lobby. They stopped near the elevators. Laura knew she should say goodnight, go to her room, process what had just happened. Instead, she found herself standing close to him, looking up into those blue eyes that seemed to see right through her professional facade to the person underneath. I had a really good time tonight, she said. So did I. He hesitated, then added, Can I see you tomorrow? There is a panel on digital innovation I am moderating in the afternoon, but I am free for breakfast. I would like that. He leaned down and kissed her cheek, a gentle touch that lasted only a second but left her skin tingling. Good night, Laura. She rode the elevator to her floor in a daze, her mind spinning. This was not supposed to happen. She was supposed to be networking professionally, gathering intelligence for Gregory, representing Hartman Publishing with dignity and focus. Instead, she had spent the evening falling for her biggest competitor, sharing secrets and dreams and a connection that felt deeper than anything she had experienced in years. In her room, she texted Maya. I think I just had the best date of my life. Maya's response was immediate. Details. Who is he? Laura stared at her phone, trying to figure out how to explain. It is complicated. The good ones always are. Tell me everything tomorrow, sleep well. But sleep was impossible. Laura lay in bed, replaying every moment of the evening. The way Henry had listened when she talked, really listened instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. The intelligence in his eyes, the warmth of his laugh, the gentle strength of his hand holding hers. The fact that he was Henry Isaacson, CEO of Hudson Enterprises, seemed almost irrelevant in the face of how he had made her feel. Almost. Because in the morning, reality would reassert itself. They were competitors. She worked for a company that saw his success as their failure. Gregory had sent her here specifically to undermine Hudson Enterprises' strategies. And she had just spent the evening flirting with and opening up to the one person she was supposed to be investigating. Thursday morning arrived too quickly. Laura dressed carefully, choosing a blue dress that Maya always said brought out her eyes. She met Henry in the hotel restaurant at 8, finding him already seated at a table by the window. He stood when he saw her, his smile genuine and warm. You look beautiful, he said simply. They ordered breakfast and coffee, falling back into easy conversation. Henry asked about her presentation scheduled for Friday, offered suggestions when she mentioned feeling nervous about it, and shared his own anxiety about public speaking despite years of practice. The trick is to remember that everyone in the audience wants you to succeed, he said. They are not hoping you fail. They came to learn from you. That is actually helpful, thank you. What are you doing after the conference ends? He asked, his tone casual but his eyes intent. Flying back to Chicago Saturday morning. You? Same flight time, probably. Different city, though. I am based in Boston. He paused. I know this is crazy. We have known each other for less than 24 hours, but I really want to keep seeing you, figure out what this is between us. Laura's heart raced. She wanted that too, desperately, but the complications loomed large in her mind. Henry, I need to be honest about something. My boss sent me here specifically to learn about Hudson Enterprises, to figure out why you keep beating us and what we can do to compete better. This was not supposed to happen. I know, he said quietly. I figured that out last night, just like I am sure you have figured out that I could pump you for information about Hartman's strategies if I wanted to. But that is not what this is about, is it? No, it is not. Then we keep business and personal separate, completely separate. What happens between you and me has nothing to do with our companies. He reached across the table and took her hand again, that same electric connection. Can we do that? Is that possible? Laura thought about Gregory's expectations, about her career, about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she looked at Henry's face and felt something shift inside her, a recognition that some opportunities only came once and required a leap of faith. We can try, she said. They spent the rest of breakfast making plans. Henry had to moderate his panel that afternoon, and Laura had sessions she wanted to attend, but they would meet for dinner, somewhere away from the conference crowds. He knew a place in the West Village, small and quiet, where they could talk without worrying about who might overhear. Laura spent the afternoon in conference rooms, taking notes and exchanging business cards, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying Henry's words, the way he had looked at her, the possibility of something real developing between them despite the impossible circumstances. Her phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. "How is the conference? Learn anything useful?" She stared at the message, guilt twisting in her stomach. What could she say? That she had met Henry Isakson and was having dinner with him tonight, that she was falling for the man whose company was destroying Hartman's market share. Lots of good information, she typed back. "We'll have a full report when I return." Dinner that night exceeded every expectation. The restaurant was intimate and charming, tucked away on a quiet street lined with brownstones. They sat at a corner table, sharing plates of grilled octopus and handmade pasta, talking about everything except work. Henry told her about his parents, how his mother had instilled in him a love of reading, and his father had taught him that success meant nothing if you compromised your integrity to achieve it. Laura shared stories about growing up as the youngest of 4 kids, always trying to prove she was just as capable as her older siblings. Her parents still lived in Indiana, running the hardware store her grandfather had founded. They were proud of her success, but did not really understand what she did. Publishing seemed like an abstract concept when you spent your days selling hammers and paint. "When can I see you again?" Henry asked as they shared tiramisu for dessert. "I do not know. We live in different cities. We work for competing companies. This is impossible. Impossible is just another word for difficult," he said. "Boston to Chicago is a 2-hour flight. We both travel for work. We can make this work if we want to." "You want to?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. "More than I have wanted anything in a long time." He reached across the table and cradled her face in his hand, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons to walk away, but I also know that connection like this does not come along often. I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did not at least try." Laura leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them, he was watching her with an intensity that took her breath away. "I want to try," she whispered. He kissed her then, leaning across the table, his lips warm and gentle against hers. It was not a long kiss, not dramatic or overwhelming, just a perfect moment of connection, a promise of possibility. They walked through the West Village afterward, hand in hand, looking at the old buildings and vintage shops. Henry pulled her close when the evening air turned cool, his arm around her shoulders feeling natural and right. They talked about books and movies, about places they wanted to travel and dreams they had not shared with anyone else. "I have always wanted to learn to sail," Laura admitted. "There is something romantic about it, navigating by wind and stars, being completely present in the moment." "I could teach you," Henry said. "I have a small sailboat in Boston Harbor. Nothing fancy, but she is seaworthy and reliable. You sail." "Since I was 12. My uncle had a boat and took me out every summer. It is the only place I can completely disconnect from everything else." He smiled down at her. "I would love to share that with you." They returned to the hotel late, reluctant to separate. In the elevator, Henry pulled her close and kissed her properly, deeply, his hands in her hair and her arms around his neck. When the doors opened on her floor, they broke apart, both breathing hard. "Come to Boston next weekend," he said. "Let me show you the city. We can go sailing if the weather is good." "I will check my schedule," Laura said, though she was already mentally clearing her weekend. "Good night, Laura." He kissed her once more softly. "Sweet dreams." She watched him descend in the elevator, then walked to her room on shaking legs. This was really happening. She was falling for Henry Isaacson, and from the way he looked at her, he was falling just as hard. Friday morning brought her panel discussion, and Laura was grateful for Henry's advice about public speaking. She presented her ideas on innovative marketing strategies, answered questions from the audience, and networked during the breaks. Several people approached her afterward with compliments and business cards, including a senior editor from a major house who said she would love to discuss collaboration opportunities. Henry texted her during lunch. "Heard your panel was brilliant. Wish I could have been there but had meetings." "Dinner tonight?" "Definitely," she replied, unable to stop smiling. Their last evening in New York was bittersweet. They went to a rooftop bar with views of the Empire State Building lit up against the night sky. Henry was quieter than usual, his hand constantly finding hers, his eyes watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I do not want this to end. That I am terrified of getting on a plane tomorrow and having this turn into just a memory." He turned to face her fully. "I am falling for you, Laura. I know it is fast and crazy, but it is real." Her heart soared and broke simultaneously. "I am falling for you too, but I am scared. What happens when we go back to reality, when we have to compete against each other, when Gregory finds out? We figure it out together, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, but we do not run from this just because it is hard." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "Promise me you will come to Boston next weekend." "I promise." They stayed on that rooftop until the bar closed, holding each other, stealing kisses, making promises about a future that felt both impossible and inevitable. Saturday morning, Laura packed her bags and checked out of the hotel. She had not seen Henry at breakfast and assumed he had an early flight. But as she walked through the lobby, she spotted him by the entrance, 2 coffee cups in his hands. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her one. They shared a taxi to the airport, sitting close in the back seat, neither wanting to acknowledge that separation was imminent. At the terminal, they discovered their flights left within 30 minutes of each other from adjacent gates. "I guess this is goodbye for now," Laura said, her throat tight. "Not goodbye, just see you soon." Henry pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She breathed in his scent, memorizing the feel of his embrace, already missing him. "Text me when you land," he murmured against her hair. "You too." One final kiss, deep and desperate, and then Laura forced herself to walk away. She did not look back, afraid that if she did, she would not be able to leave. The flight to Chicago felt endless. Laura tried to work on her laptop, reviewing her notes from the conference, preparing her report for Gregory. But her mind kept drifting to Henry, to the impossible situation they were navigating, to the question of what would happen next. Maya was waiting at her apartment when she got home, armed with wine and takeout Chinese food. Laura collapsed on her couch and told her everything, the words spilling out in a rush. "Wait, hold on," Maya interrupted. "You are dating Henry Isaacson, the Henry Isaacson, CEO of Hudson Enterprises." "I am not sure dating is the right word. We spent 4 days together and now live in different cities and work for rival companies. It is a disaster." "It is romantic as hell is what it is," Maya corrected. "This is like a movie. Star-crossed lovers from competing corporations, fighting against the world to be together. It is not a movie. It is my actual life and career on the line." Laura buried her face in her hands. "What am I going to tell Gregory? Nothing, for now. You are allowed to have a personal life. What you do outside of work is your business." Maya poured them both generous glasses of wine. "Give it time. See where it goes. Maybe it will fizzle out and the problem solves itself." But Laura knew it would not fizzle out. What she felt for Henry was too real, too intense to simply evaporate with distance. If anything, being apart only made her want to see him more. True to his word, Henry texted her every day. Good morning messages, random thoughts throughout the day, good night wishes that made her fall asleep smiling. They talked on the phone every evening, conversations that stretched for hours, covering everything from mundane details of their days to deep philosophical discussions about life and meaning and purpose. Monday morning, Laura returned to work and faced the inevitable meeting with Gregory. She presented her conference report, highlighting the trends she had observed, the contacts she had made, the opportunities she saw for Hartman Publishing. She did not mention Henry. "Good work," Gregory said when she finished. "Did you learn anything about Hudson's strategies?" Laura's stomach tightened. They are very focused on digital integration and author platform building. They invest heavily in marketing individual authors as brands, not just selling books. We already do that. Not to the same extent. They dedicate resources to long-term author development, even for debuts who might not be profitable for years. It is a different philosophy. Gregory leaned back in his chair, considering. That requires capital we do not have. Hudson can afford to take risks because their CEO apparently has unlimited funding. We have shareholders to answer to. Maybe we need to think smaller then. Target niche markets where we can dominate instead of trying to compete across the board. Laura leaned forward, warming to her argument. Hudson goes after everything. We could specialize, become the go-to publisher for specific genres or demographics. Interesting. Put together a proposal and we will discuss it at the next board meeting. Gregory smiled, the expression rare enough to be startling. "I knew sending you to that conference was the right call." Laura returned to her office feeling conflicted. She had not betrayed any of Hudson's secrets, but she had used her knowledge of their strategies to benefit Hartman. Was that crossing the line she and Henry had agreed to maintain? She texted him. "Had to give my boss a conference report. Did not mention you but felt weird using information I learned to compete against you." His response came quickly. "You are doing your job. I would do the same. We knew this would be complicated. Still coming to Boston this weekend." "Already booked my flight." The week crawled by. Laura threw herself into work, developing her proposal for niche market specialization, meeting with her team, reviewing manuscripts and marketing plans. But every spare moment, her thoughts drifted to Henry and the weekend ahead. Friday evening, she flew to Boston. Henry met her at the airport, and the moment she saw him, everything else fell away. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her like she was oxygen and he had been drowning. "I missed you," he said against her lips. "I missed you too." He took her to his apartment in the North End, a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. It was masculine and comfortable, filled with books and art, and a well-worn leather couch that looked perfect for reading. "This is beautiful," Laura said, walking to the windows. The sun was setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Wait until you see it at sunrise." Henry came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I am really glad you are here." She turned in his embrace, looking up at him. "Me too." They ordered pizza from a place Henry swore made the best in Boston and ate sitting on his couch, her feet tucked under her, his arm around her shoulders. It felt domestic and natural, like they had been doing this for years instead of days. "Tell me about your week," he said. Laura recounted her meetings and projects, carefully editing out anything that touched on competitive information. Henry did the same, sharing funny stories about his staff and frustrations with a difficult negotiation, but keeping the details vague. "This is weird, is not it?" Laura said. "Trying to have a normal relationship while tiptoeing around huge parts of our lives." "It is not ideal," Henry agreed, "but nothing worth having is easy. We will figure out a rhythm." That night they stayed up late talking, curled together on his couch. Henry told her about his plans to expand Hudson's audiobook division, his concerns about the consolidation happening in the industry, his hope that publishing could evolve without losing what made it special. Laura shared her frustrations with Hartman's resistance to change, her fear that they would become irrelevant if they did not adapt faster, her dream of one day starting her own small press focused on diverse voices and underrepresented stories. "You should do it," Henry said. "You are talented enough to make it work. It is a huge risk. What if I fail? What if you succeed? What if you build something amazing that changes the industry?" He kissed her temple. "Fear is a terrible reason to not try." Saturday morning he took her sailing. The weather was perfect, cool and clear with steady winds. Henry's boat was a 30-foot sloop, old but meticulously maintained. He taught her the basics, how to raid the wind, how to trim the sails, how to feel the boat responding to her touch on the tiller. They sailed out into the harbor, Boston's skyline receding behind them. Laura felt free in a way she had not experienced in years, the wind in her hair and the sun on her face, and Henry beside her, patient and encouraging as she learned. "You are a natural," he said, watching her adjust the jib. "I have a good teacher." They dropped anchor in a quiet cove and ate the lunch Henry had packed, sandwiches and fruit and cold beer. They swam in the surprisingly warm water, laughing and splashing like kids. Henry pulled her close as they treaded water, his legs tangling with hers, his hands on her waist. "I could get used to this," Laura said, her arms around his neck. "Yeah," he kissed her, tasting like salt and sunshine. "Me too." That evening they walked through the North End, stopping at cafes and shops, sharing cannoli and cappuccino. Henry held her hand, pointing out his favorite places, telling her stories about the neighborhood. People greeted him as they passed, clearly recognizing him, but he did not stop to chat, keeping his attention on Laura. "You are kind of a big deal here," she observed. "Boston is a small city in some ways. Everyone knows everyone's business." He pulled her closer. "Which means people are probably going to start asking questions about you. What will you tell them? The truth? That I met an amazing woman and I am falling crazy in love with her." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Is that okay?" Laura's breath caught. "Love." He had said love. "Yeah. That is more than okay." He kissed her right there on the sidewalk, deep and thorough, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, Laura felt dizzy with happiness and terror in equal measure. Sunday came too quickly. Laura's flight left at 4, which meant leaving for the airport by 2. They spent the morning in bed, talking and kissing and memorizing each other, neither wanting to acknowledge the approaching separation. "Come to Chicago next weekend," Laura said, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I have a board meeting Friday afternoon, but I could fly out after." Would Saturday and Sunday work? Perfect. At the airport, saying goodbye was even harder than it had been in New York. Laura clung to Henry, fighting tears, wishing she could just stay in Boston and forget about real life. "2 weeks total before I see you again," she said. "That is too long, I know, but we will talk every day, and then before you know it, we will be together again." He kissed her forehead. "This is worth it. You are worth it." The flight home felt lonely. Laura stared out the window at the clouds below, already missing Henry so much it physically hurt. This was crazy. She barely knew him. 4 days in New York, 1 weekend in Boston, and she was completely head over heels. It should not be possible to fall this hard this fast. But her heart did not care about logic or timelines. It just knew that Henry Isaacson made her happier than she had been in years. Monday morning brought a crisis. Gregory called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. Laura hurried to the conference room, finding her colleagues already assembled, their expressions worried. "Hudson Enterprises just announced a major acquisition," Gregory said without preamble. "They bought Meridian Press. That gives them control of an additional 30% market share in trade paperbacks and a significant backlist of classic titles." Laura's stomach dropped. Meridian Press was one of Hartman's oldest partners. They had collaborated on several successful joint ventures, and now Hudson owned them. "This is a direct attack on our business," Gregory continued. "They are systematically buying up our allies and squeezing us out of the market. We need to respond aggressively." The meeting devolved into arguments about strategy. Some people wanted to pursue their own acquisitions, fighting fire with fire. Others advocated for cost-cutting and consolidation, protecting what they had rather than overextending. Laura sat silently, her mind racing. Had Henry known about this? He had mentioned expanding the audiobook division, but he had not said anything about acquiring Meridian. Was he keeping secrets from her, or had this happened in the past week? She texted him during lunch. "Did you know Hudson was buying Meridian?" His response took 20 minutes. "Yes." "Deal closed Friday. I wanted to tell you but could not until it was public. I am sorry." Laura stared at her phone, anger and hurt warring in her chest. He had known. He had known that his company was making a move that would directly harm Hartman, and he had said nothing. Yes, they had agreed to keep business separate, but this felt like a betrayal. "This is exactly why mixing business and personal is a bad idea," she typed back. "Can we talk about this, please? I need time to think." She put her phone on silent and tried to focus on work. But the hurt lingered, a constant ache beneath everything else. That evening when Henry called, she did not answer. His text came immediately. "I understand you are angry, but please let me explain. I love you, Laura." Those 3 words should have made her heart soar. Instead, they just made everything more complicated. How could he love her and still keep secrets that affected her job? How could she trust him when their companies were at war? Maya came over that night, bringing ice cream and sympathy. "Men are idiots," she declared. "Even the rich, handsome CEO ones." "He said he loves me," Laura said, her voice small. And I think I love him too, but I do not know if that is enough when everything else is working against us." "Love is not supposed to be easy," Maya said. "If it were, everyone would be deliriously happy all the time instead of eating ice cream on their best friend's couch at 9 on a Monday night." She nudged Laura with her shoulder. "But it is supposed to be worth fighting for. Is he worth fighting for?" Laura thought about Henry's smile, his laugh, the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. The way he challenged her to think bigger, to take risks, to believe in herself. The way her entire world felt brighter when he was in it. "Yes," she said. "He is worth fighting for," she called him back. He answered on the first ring. "I am sorry," they said simultaneously, then laughed despite the tension. "You go first," Henry said. "I was hurt that you kept the acquisition from me. I know that is not fair, that you had legitimate business reasons for confidentiality, but it felt like you chose Hudson over me. I never want you to feel that way. But you are right. I could not tell you about Meridian before it was public. That would have been crossing every ethical line." He paused. "The truth is, this is always going to be hard. Our companies will compete, make moves that hurt each other, win and lose accounts. We agreed to keep business separate because that is the only way this works. But I should have warned you that something big was coming, even if I could not share details. I should not have shut you out. That was childish." Laura curled up on her couch, pressing the phone to her ear like she could somehow get closer to him through sheer will. "I miss you." "I miss you too, and I meant what I said earlier. I love you, Laura. I know it is fast and crazy, but it is true." "I love you too," she whispered, the words both terrifying and liberating. They talked for hours, working through the complexities of their situation, establishing better boundaries and communication strategies. It was not a perfect solution, but it was a start. The next 2 weeks tested their resolve. Hartman launched an aggressive campaign to win back accounts lost to Hudson, and Laura found herself working late nights to develop compelling proposals. Henry was equally busy managing the integration of Meridian Press, traveling between Boston and New York for meetings. They texted when they could, talked late at night when they were both too exhausted to think straight, counted down the days until they would be together again. Laura threw herself into her work, determined to prove that Hartman could compete with Hudson despite the resource disparity. Her proposal for niche market specialization gained traction with the board. They approved a pilot program focusing on debut literary fiction, a category where Hartman had historically performed well, but had lost ground in recent years. Laura assembled a small team and began developing a comprehensive strategy. Finally, Friday arrived. Henry texted from the airport, "Boarding now. Cannot wait to see you." Laura cleaned her apartment, changed outfits 3 times, and forced herself to calm down. When he knocked on her door at 8 that evening, she flung it open and launched herself into his arms. "Hi," she said against his neck. "Hi yourself." He kicked the door closed and kissed her, deep and hungry. 2 weeks of longing poured into that single connection. They barely made it to the couch. Laura pulled him down beside her, her hands in his hair, his hands exploring her waist, her back, everywhere he could reach. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I really, really missed you," he said. "Show me," she whispered. He did, thoroughly and wonderfully, until they were tangled together on her couch, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Tell me about your week," she said. Henry shared stories about the Meridian integration, the challenges of merging 2 different corporate cultures, the excitement of expanding Hudson's catalog. Laura told him about her niche market proposal, her team's enthusiasm, her cautious optimism that they could carve out a sustainable competitive advantage. "That is brilliant strategy," Henry said. "Playing to your strengths instead of trying to match Hudson's resources." "I learned from watching you," Laura admitted. "How you transformed Hudson by focusing on what made you different instead of trying to be like everyone else. I am glad I could inspire you, even if it means you are going to make my life harder competitively." He kissed the top of her head. "I am proud of you." Those simple words meant more than he probably realized. Laura had spent her whole life trying to prove herself, to earn recognition and respect. But Henry's pride in her accomplishments felt different, untainted by competition or agenda. He was proud of her because he loved her, not because her success benefited him. Saturday, Laura showed Henry her Chicago. They walked through Lincoln Park, visited the Art Institute, had lunch at a neighborhood bistro where she was friendly with the owner. She took him to Brewster's, where Maya joined them and interrogated Henry with the protective intensity of a best friend who took her duties seriously. "So your company is basically destroying the place where Laura works," Maya said bluntly, stirring sugar into her latte. "Maya," Laura protested. "It is a fair question." Henry met Maya's eyes steadily. "Yes, Hudson and Hartman are competitors. Yes, we have won accounts that could have gone to them, but I would never use my relationship with Laura to gain an unfair advantage, and I believe she would not either. What we have is completely separate from business. But business affects her life, her job security, her income, her career prospects." Maya was not backing down. "How do you reconcile loving her with actively working to undermine her professionally?" "I am not trying to undermine Laura specifically. I am running a business in a competitive industry. If Hartman is struggling, that is about larger market forces and strategic decisions their leadership made long before I met Laura." He reached across the table and took Laura's hand. "I want her to succeed. I want her to build something amazing, but I cannot handicap my own company to make that easier." Maya studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I respect that honesty. But if you hurt her, I know people who know people, just saying." Henry smiled. "Noted and understood." After Maya left, Laura and Henry walked along the lakefront, watching the sun set over the water. "Sorry about Maya," Laura said. "She is protective. I like that you have someone looking out for you. Everyone should have a friend like that." He pulled her close against the wind coming off the lake. "Did I pass the test?" With flying colors. Though the threat was real, Maya absolutely knows people who know people. They had dinner at a little Thai place Laura loved, then returned to her apartment. Sunday morning they slept late, wrapped around each other in Laura's bed. She woke to find him watching her, his expression soft. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Just thinking how lucky I am. How unlikely it was that we would meet at all, let alone fall in love." He traced her jawline with his finger. "I do not believe in fate, but this feels pretty close." "I know what you mean." Laura captured his hand and kissed his palm. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for reality to intrude and ruin this. Reality is already here. We work for competing companies, live in different cities, have about 1,000 reasons this should not work, but we are making it work anyway." He kissed her nose. "Stop waiting for disaster, just be here with me right now." So she did. They spent the rest of Sunday being lazy and domestic, cooking breakfast together, reading on her couch, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. When Henry had to leave for the airport that evening, Laura held on to him longer than necessary, already dreading the separation. "Next weekend?" she asked. "I will check my schedule and let you know. We might need to skip one. I have to travel to London for a book fair." "That is fine. Just let me know." Laura forced a smile, not wanting their goodbye to be sad, but it was sad anyway. Watching him leave hurt every single time. The following weeks fell into a pattern. Henry came to Chicago or Laura went to Boston, stolen weekends where they pretended the outside world did not exist. During the week, they navigated the increasingly tense competition between their companies. Laura's niche market strategy was working. Hartman signed 3 debut authors with significant buzz, and Laura's team developed innovative marketing campaigns that generated genuine excitement. Gregory was pleased enough to approve expanding the program. Meanwhile, Hudson continued its aggressive expansion. They launched a successful podcast division, signed a major deal with a celebrity book club, and announced plans for a new imprint focused on translated works. Every success felt like a small defeat to Laura, even as she was proud of what Henry was building. 3 months into their relationship, things came to a head. Hartman and Hudson both submitted proposals for a massive joint venture with a major retailer that would determine the next generation of point-of-sale marketing. It was a huge opportunity, potentially worth millions in revenue. Laura worked around the clock on Hartman's proposal, assembling data, crafting messaging, developing creative concepts. She knew Hudson would submit something impressive, but she was determined to win. This account could stabilize Hartman's finances and prove they could compete at the highest level. The night before both proposals were due, Henry called. "How is it going?" he asked, exhausting. "We are doing final revisions now, should be done by midnight." Laura rubbed her tired eyes, staring at her computer screen. "How about you? Similar. Our team has been amazing." He paused. "I hate that we are competing against each other on this." "Me too. But that is the reality, right? We knew this would happen." "I know. I just wish I could see your proposal, tell you what to improve, help you make it better." His voice was soft. "I want you to succeed, Laura. I want to succeed on my own merits, not because my boyfriend gave me insider information." The words came out sharper than she intended. "Sorry, I am just tired and stressed." "I get it. Go finish your proposal, knock them dead. You too, may the best company win." 2 weeks later, the decision came down. Hudson Enterprises won the account. Laura sat in Gregory's office, listening to him rant about unfair advantages and corporate espionage, feeling numb. They had to have inside information, Gregory insisted. Their proposal addressed concerns that we specifically discussed in our preliminary meetings with the retailer. Concerns that were supposed to be confidential. "Or they just did better research," Laura said quietly. "Whose side are you on?" Gregory turned on her, his expression sharp. "Hartman's, obviously, but we cannot cry foul every time we lose. Maybe they were just better this time. Better because they are willing to spend whatever it takes, ethics be damned." Gregory slammed his hand on his desk. "I am sick of losing to Hudson. We need to be more aggressive, more willing to take risks." Laura left his office feeling defeated. That evening when Henry called, she almost did not answer, but she did, because ignoring problems had never been her style. "Congratulations on the account," she said, her voice flat. "Laura, I am sorry. I know how much this meant to you." "Did you have inside information?" "Gregory thinks someone leaked details from our meetings." "No," Henry's voice was firm. "We did our research, talked to people in the industry, made educated guesses about what the retailer wanted. But we did not cheat, and I would never ask you to compromise yourself by sharing confidential information." "I believe you," and she did. But that did not make losing any easier. "I am just tired of watching Hartman struggle while Hudson thrives. It is hard to separate my feelings about you from my feelings about your company. I know, but they are separate things. My love for you has nothing to do with business competition. Maybe it should, though. Maybe we are fooling ourselves thinking we can keep these worlds apart when they overlap so completely." Laura felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I do not know if I can do this anymore, Henry. It hurts too much." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several long seconds. "Are you breaking up with me?" His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the pain underneath. "I do not know. Maybe we need some space to think about whether this is really sustainable. I love you, Laura. That is not going to change because we work for competing companies. We have made this work for 3 months. We can keep making it work, can we? Or are we just prolonging the inevitable?" She wiped her eyes, angry at herself for crying. Every time Hudson succeeds, Hartman suffers. How long before Gregory starts questioning my loyalty? How long before your board asks why you are dating someone from a rival company? We are living on borrowed time. Then we need to change the circumstances. There are other options. Like what? One of us quitting our job. That is not fair to ask. I am not asking. I am saying there are solutions if we want to find them, but we have to both want that. Henry's voice softened. Do you still want this? Do you still want us? Laura closed her eyes, thinking about all the reasons to walk away, to protect her heart and her career. Then she thought about Henry's smile, his laugh, the way he made her feel like she could accomplish anything. The way he challenged and supported her in equal measure. The way she had fallen completely, irrevocably in love with him. Yes, she whispered, I still want us. Then we will figure it out, together. But I need you to trust me, Laura. Trust that I am on your side even when our companies are not. I do trust you. I am just scared. Me too. But fear is a terrible reason to give up on something real. They talked for another hour, working through their concerns, recommitting to making their relationship work despite the obstacles. By the time they hung up, Laura felt steadier, more hopeful. But the problems did not disappear just because they wanted them to. Over the next month, tensions escalated. Gregory became increasingly paranoid about Hudson's success, questioning Laura's decisions, second-guessing her proposals. She found herself defending every choice, every strategy, trying to prove her loyalty while maintaining the integrity she valued. Henry was dealing with his own pressures. His board wanted him to pursue even more aggressive expansion, to crush competitors like Hartman entirely. He pushed back, arguing for sustainable growth over short-term dominance, but the pressure was constant. They saw each other less frequently as their work demands intensified. Stolen phone calls replaced leisurely conversations. Text messages were brief and hurried. Laura felt them drifting apart, the distance growing despite their best intentions. Then everything changed. Laura arrived at work on a Tuesday morning to find Gregory waiting in her office, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said. Her heart sank. This was it. He had found out about Henry and was going to fire her. "I am resigning," Gregory said. Laura stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" The board made it clear that they want to pursue a different direction. Younger leadership, more aggressive strategies, digital focus. They are right. I am 62 years old and set in my ways. Hartman needs someone who can compete in the modern market. He smiled sadly. They are offering me a generous retirement package. I am taking it. I do not understand. You built this company. My grandfather built this company. I just tried to maintain his legacy, but legacy is not enough anymore. He looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. They want you to apply for the CEO position. Laura's mouth fell open. Me? I am 28. I have only been here 5 years. You are innovative, strategic, and understand where publishing is heading. You have already proven yourself with the niche market program. The board is impressed. He turned back to her. I am recommending you for the position, but the decision is ultimately theirs. Laura spent the next week in a daze. The board interviewed her twice, grilled her about her vision for Hartman's future, challenged her on every point. She presented a comprehensive plan for modernization while maintaining the company's core values, building on the niche market success while expanding into new digital platforms. She did not tell Henry. This felt too big, too important, too fraught with potential complications. If she got the job, she would be his direct competitor, CEO to CEO. Would that make their relationship impossible? The board made their decision on Friday afternoon. They offered her the position. Laura sat in the conference room, the the contract in front of her, the board members waiting for her answer. This was everything she had worked for, the culmination of years of effort and sacrifice. CEO of Hartman Publishing at 28 years old. It should have been an easy yes. But all she could think about was Henry. "Can I have the weekend to consider?" she asked. The board chairman frowned but nodded. "We need an answer by Monday morning." Laura went straight to the airport and bought a ticket to Boston. She did not call ahead, did not warn Henry she was coming. She just needed to see him, to figure out what she wanted, who she wanted to be. He was surprised when she showed up at his apartment at 9 that evening, but he pulled her inside without questions, holding her close. "What is wrong?" he asked, stroking her hair. "Hartman offered me the CEO position. Gregory is retiring." Henry pulled back to look at her, his eyes wide. "Laura, that is amazing. You should be celebrating." "Should I? Because if I take this job, I become your direct competitor, CEO to CEO. How does that work for us?" He led her to the couch, sitting down and pulling her beside him. "Tell me what you are thinking." "I am thinking that I have wanted to run a publishing house since I was 22 years old, that this is an incredible opportunity, possibly a once-in-a-lifetime chance. But I am also thinking that taking this job might destroy what we have." She looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I do not want to choose between my career and you, but I am afraid I might have to." Henry was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and careful. "I would never ask you to turn down this opportunity. You are brilliant and talented and absolutely capable of leading Hartman to success. If you do not take this job, you will regret it for the rest of your life. But what about us?" "I do not know," he admitted. "Being CEO changes everything. The scrutiny, the pressure, the responsibility to stakeholders. It will be harder than what we have been managing. Maybe impossible. Maybe." He took her hands in his thumbs stroking her knuckles. "Or maybe we find a way to make it work because we love each other enough to fight for it." Laura leaned her head on his shoulder, exhausted and overwhelmed. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. "I have been thinking about something," Henry said finally. "An idea that might be crazy but could solve some of our problems. I am listening." "What if Hartman and Hudson merged?" Laura sat up, staring at him. "What? Hear me out. Hartman has heritage, reputation, and strong relationships with literary authors. Hudson has capital, technology, and aggressive marketing capabilities. Together, we could be unstoppable. We could create a new kind of publishing house that honors tradition while embracing innovation." "You want to acquire Hartman?" The words tasted bitter. "No, I want to merge as equals. A true partnership, not a takeover. You would run the literary division, I would handle commercial and digital. We would both be on the executive board, making decisions together." He cupped her face in his hands. "We could work together instead of against each other. Build something bigger than either company could alone. That is a huge risk. What if it does not work? What if we lose everything? What if it does work? What if we create something amazing?" He kissed her softly. "I am willing to take that risk if you are." Laura's mind raced with possibilities and problems. A merger would require board approval from both companies. It would mean restructuring, layoffs, combining cultures. It would be complicated and difficult and might fail spectacularly. But it would also mean working alongside Henry every day. Building something together instead of watching each other from across a battlefield. Fighting for a shared vision instead of competing for market share. "We would need to present this carefully," she said slowly, her strategic mind already working through the logistics. "Focus on the business benefits, not our relationship. Show both boards how this creates value. You are considering it." Henry's eyes lit up with hope. "I am considering that it might be the craziest, most brilliant idea you have ever had." She kissed him, pouring 3 months of longing and frustration and love into it. "Let me take the CEO job. Give me a few weeks to get established, understand Hartman's position better. Then we can explore this seriously." "So you are taking the job?" "Yeah, I am taking the job." The decision felt right as soon as she said it out loud. "I am going to be a CEO." Henry picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. "You are going to be amazing." That weekend, they celebrated and strategized in equal measure. Laura flew back to Chicago Sunday evening and accepted the board's offer Monday morning. The announcement went public on Wednesday, sending ripples through the industry. Laura Nichols, at 28, was now the youngest CEO in Hartman Publishing's history. The first month was brutal. She worked 18-hour days, meeting with every department, reviewing operations, identifying inefficiencies and opportunities. She restructured the executive team, promoted talented people who had been overlooked, and let go of those who could not adapt to her vision. Her niche market program expanded aggressively. She signed deals with independent bookstores, created innovative author partnerships, and launched a digital platform that showcased Hartman's literary catalog in new ways. The industry took notice. Henry watched from Boston, proud and supportive, offering advice when she asked but respecting her autonomy. They talked every night, their conversations now including strategic discussions about the industry alongside personal updates. 3 months into her tenure as CEO, Laura felt ready. She scheduled a video call with Henry to discuss the merger seriously. "I have run the numbers," she said, sharing her screen to show detailed financial projections. "A merger makes sense for both companies." Hartman brings a catalog worth approximately $40 million and strong relationships in literary fiction. Hudson brings capital, technology infrastructure, and commercial market dominance. Combined, we could command 15% of the entire trade publishing market. "I have been doing similar analysis," Henry said. "Our respective boards would need to see clear value propositions. For Hartman, that is financial stability and access to resources. For Hudson, it is legitimacy in literary circles and an established backlist. We need a third-party consulting firm to validate the business case, remove any perception that this is personal rather than strategic." Laura pulled up another document. "I have already reached out to Morrison Strategic. They specialize in publishing industry mergers. You have been busy." Henry's smile was visible even through the video call. "What is the timeline?" 6 months minimum. "We need Morrison's analysis, board presentations for both companies, stakeholder meetings, regulatory review. If we move forward, we are looking at a year before actual integration begins." "Can you handle the scrutiny? People will absolutely question your motives once our relationship becomes public." Laura had thought about this extensively. "Let them question. The business case stands on its own merits. Our relationship is personal and private until we decide otherwise." They spent the next 3 months building their case. Morrison Strategic conducted a comprehensive analysis and concluded that a Hartman-Hudson merger would create significant shareholder value for both companies. The consulting firm's report was thorough and unbiased, exactly what they needed. Laura presented to Hartman's board first. She walked them through the financial projections, the strategic advantages, the market opportunities. She addressed their concerns about losing independence, about Hudson's more aggressive culture, about the risks inherent in any major change. "This is not about giving up who we are," she said firmly. "This is about building on our strengths while addressing our weaknesses. Hartman cannot compete long-term with our current resources. We are doing well with niche markets, but that is not enough for sustainable growth." This merger gives us the capital and infrastructure to expand while maintaining our literary focus. The board debated for 2 hours. Finally, they voted 7-3 in favor of exploring the merger further. Henry faced similar resistance from Hudson's board. They questioned why he would merge with a smaller competitor when he could simply continue taking market share. He argued that true industry leadership required both commercial success and critical respect, something Hudson lacked despite its financial performance. His board voted to proceed, contingent on favorable terms. The negotiation phase was intense. Lawyers argued over valuation, control structures, and executive roles. Laura and Henry recused themselves from discussions about their personal positions, letting the boards and their advisors hammer out details. 4 months after initial presentations, they had a deal. The new entity would be called Hartman Publishing. Henry would serve as CEO, Laura as president and chief literary officer. They would both sit on the executive board alongside representatives from the original company's boards. Financially, Hudson shareholders would own 60% of the new company and Hartman 40%, reflecting their relative valuations. But operationally, they would function as equal partners in decision-making. The announcement was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Laura barely slept the night before, anxious about the industry reaction, about whether they had made the right decision, about how this would change her relationship with Henry. He called her at 6 in the morning Chicago time. "You ready for this?" Terrified. "You?" Same, but also excited. "We are going to build something incredible, Laura." The press release went out at 9 Eastern Time. By 9:30, Laura's phone was exploding with calls from trade publications, colleagues, former mentors. The industry was shocked. Hartman Publishing, the last family-owned traditional literary house of any size, merging with Hudson Enterprises, the aggressive digital upstart, opinions were divided. Some called it brilliant strategy. Others predicted disaster. Everyone wanted to interview Laura and Henry to understand the reasoning, to hear the vision. They scheduled a joint press conference for Thursday, their first public appearance together. Laura flew to Boston Wednesday evening. Henry met her at the airport, pulling her into his arms the moment he saw her. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "I have done 12 interviews today. My voice is going hoarse." She leaned into him, exhausted and wired simultaneously. "How about you? Similar." Everyone wants to know the real story behind the merger. He kissed the top of her head. Ready to tell them, they had discussed this at length. Their relationship would inevitably become public, but they wanted to control the narrative. Tomorrow's press conference would focus on business, but they would acknowledge their personal connection honestly and directly. Thursday morning, they stood together at a podium in Hudson's conference room, facing 50 reporters and cameras broadcasting live to industry professionals worldwide. Henry spoke first, outlining the business rationale for the merger, the opportunities they saw, the vision for Hudson Hartman's future. He was confident and articulate, every inch the successful CEO. Then Laura took the microphone. She talked about Hartman's legacy, about the importance of literary publishing, about how this merger would strengthen rather than compromise their mission. She fielded questions about independence, about cultural integration, about whether they could truly maintain Hartman's identity within the larger organization. Finally, a reporter from Publishers Weekly asked the question they had been expecting. "There are rumors that you and Mr. Isaacson are personally involved. Did your relationship influence this merger decision?" Laura glanced at Henry, who nodded slightly. "Henry and I have been in a relationship for nearly a year," Laura said clearly. "We met at the National Publishing Conference, and we fell in love despite the complicated circumstances of working for competing companies. Our relationship did not drive the merger decision. The business case stands on its own merits, as outlined in Morrison Strategic's independent analysis. But I will not pretend our relationship did not influence our willingness to think creatively about solutions to industry challenges. Sometimes personal connections open doors to professional possibilities. We believe this merger benefits our shareholders, our authors, our employees, and the publishing industry as a whole. The questions came rapidly after that, some skeptical, some supportive. Henry and Laura answered them together, presenting a united front, demonstrating the partnership they envisioned for Hudson Hartman. When the press conference ended, they were both exhausted but relieved. The hardest part was over. Everything was public now. No more secrets, no more divided loyalties. "That went better than I expected," Laura said as they left the conference room. "You were brilliant." Henry pulled her into an empty office and kissed her properly. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you? Not in the last hour." I was starting to worry. He laughed and kissed her again, deeper this time. "I love you, Laura Nichols. I love your intelligence, your passion, your courage. I love that you took a risk on me despite every reason not to. I love that we are building something together." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Even when you drive me crazy with your aggressive business strategies. Especially then." The next 6 months were a whirlwind. The merger received regulatory approval in March. Integration planning consumed every waking moment for both of them. They worked side by side, negotiating compromises between Hartman's traditional approach and Hudson's innovative methods. There were battles, disagreements about staffing, about branding, about which authors to prioritize and which markets to pursue. Laura and Henry learned to argue productively, to push each other while respecting different perspectives. Their relationship deepened through the crucible of building Hudson Hartman. They moved in together, Henry relocating to Chicago, where the new company would be headquartered. They navigated the complexities of being both partners in life and in business, establishing boundaries while embracing collaboration. The official launch of Hudson Hartman Publishing happened in September, exactly 1 year after Laura had accepted the CEO position at Hartman. They held a celebration at the new headquarters, a renovated building in Chicago's West Loop that combined Hudson's modern aesthetic with Hartman's traditional elegance. Laura stood beside Henry, watching their combined team mingle and celebrate. Authors chatted with editors, marketing staff compared notes with their new colleagues, board members from both original companies shared drinks and stories. "We did it," she said softly. "We did," Henry agreed. "And we are just getting started." Maya appeared beside them, wine glass in hand. "I have to admit, when you first told me you were dating your rival CEO, I thought you were insane, but this actually worked out pretty well." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Laura said dryly. "I am your best friend. It is my job to be skeptical and protective." Maya raised her glass. "But I am really happy for you both. You are good together." That night, after the celebration ended and everyone went home, Laura and Henry stood alone in the new office that would be hers, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "I have been thinking," Henry said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Laura's heart stopped. "Henry, let me say this before I lose my nerve." He opened the box, revealing a simple platinum ring with a single diamond. "Laura Nichols, you are the smartest, most driven, most incredible woman I have ever met. You challenge me, inspire me, and make me want to be better every single day. We have built a company together, and I want to build a life together too. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Laura's face as she looked at the ring, at Henry's hopeful expression, at the future they were creating together. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. After a year of challenges and compromises, of fighting for their relationship against every obstacle, this moment felt like coming home. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Boston, surrounded by family and close friends. Maya was Laura's maid of honor, crying through the entire service. Henry's parents beamed with pride. Laura's family made the trip from Indiana, her father looking slightly overwhelmed by the elegance of the venue, but happy to see his youngest daughter so clearly in love. Hudson Hartman Publishing thrived under their joint leadership. The niche market strategy Laura had pioneered at Hartman expanded across the entire catalog. Henry's digital innovations gave their authors unprecedented reach. Together, they signed some of the biggest names in contemporary fiction while nurturing debut voices that might have been overlooked elsewhere. 2 years after the merger, Laura discovered she was pregnant. She and Henry had talked about starting a family, but had not actively tried, both consumed with building the company. The pregnancy was a surprise, a wonderful complication in their already complicated lives. Their daughter, Grace Hartman Isaacson, was born on a snowy December morning, 8 pounds of perfection with her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined expression. Henry cried when he held her for the first time, overwhelmed by love and terror in equal measure. Laura took 3 months of maternity leave, working part-time from home, learning to balance motherhood with professional ambition. Henry adjusted his travel schedule, refusing to miss important moments with Grace. They hired a nanny but structured their days so that at least one parent was always home in the evenings. It was exhausting and wonderful, and nothing like Laura had imagined her life would be, when she had been a 22-year-old assistant fetching coffee and making copies. She had a career she loved, a company she had helped build, a husband who was her true partner in every sense, and a daughter who made her heart feel too big for her chest. 5 years after Grace's birth, Hudson Hartman Publishing was the 3rd largest trade publisher in North America. They had acquired 2 smaller presses, launched a successful film production division, and won multiple industry awards for their innovative approaches to author development and reader engagement. Laura sat in her office on a Thursday afternoon, reviewing proposals for the next season's catalog. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Coffee tonight? I have news." She smiled, remembering their Thursday tradition from what felt like a lifetime ago. They still tried to meet weekly, though the coffee shop was now Brewster's expanded location with room for Grace to run around while they talked. Henry appeared in her doorway, loosening his tie. "Ready to head home?" "Almost. Let me finish this proposal." She looked up at him, still struck by how handsome he was, how lucky she felt. "How was your day?" "Productive. Signed the Waterman contract. He is excited to be part of the Hudson Hartman family." "That is huge. Congratulations." She stood and walked around her desk to kiss him. "I love that we get to celebrate these wins together now." "Me too." He pulled her close, his hands on her waist. "Though I also loved the days when we were rivals, stealing secret meetings and pretending we were not crazy about each other. Those days were terrifying. But also kind of thrilling." He kissed her nose. "We should probably pick up Grace from school." They left the office together, walking through the building they had created, past employees working on projects they had greenlit, building the legacy they had imagined. In the parking garage, Henry opened the car door for Laura, a gesture he still insisted on despite her protests. "I have been thinking," he said as they drove toward Grace's school. "That is usually dangerous. What if we started a nonprofit focused on literacy in underserved communities?" Use some of Hudson Hartman's resources to fund libraries, reading programs, author visits to schools that could not otherwise afford them. Laura looked at him, her heart swelling with love. This was why she had fallen for him in that hotel bar years ago. Not because he was successful or handsome or charming, though he was all those things, but because he believed in using success to create positive change, in giving back, in making the world better through the thing they both loved most. "I think that is a beautiful idea," she said softly. "Let us make it happen." They picked up Grace, who barreled into Laura's arms full of stories about her day, about the art project she had made, and the book her teacher had read, and the friend who had shared her snack. Laura listened to every word, marveling at this tiny person they had created, this perfect combination of her and Henry. That evening, after Grace was in bed and they had eaten dinner and reviewed the next day's schedules, Laura and Henry sat on their couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever think about how unlikely this all was?" Laura asked. "That we met at all, that we fell in love despite everything working against us, that we built a life together. All the time." Henry kissed the top of her head. "Best unlikely thing that ever happened to me, me too." They sat in comfortable silence, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From rivals to lovers to partners to parents, they had navigated every challenge by choosing each other, by fighting for what they wanted, by refusing to accept that obstacles were insurmountable. Laura thought about the girl she had been at 23, fresh out of college and desperate to prove herself. She could never have imagined this life, this love, this perfect, improbable happiness. But she had worked for it, risked for it, believed in it even when it seemed impossible. And now, sitting in their beautiful home with her husband beside her and their daughter asleep upstairs, and a company they had built together thriving, Laura understood that the best things in life were worth fighting for, that love and ambition could coexist, that taking risks led to the greatest rewards. She turned and kissed Henry, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into that simple gesture. He kissed her back, and in that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Their story had started with competition and secrecy, with stolen moments and impossible complications. But it had become something beautiful and lasting, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and love that had survived every test. Years later, when reporters asked Laura and Henry about the secret to their success, both personal and professional, they always gave the same answer. They chose each other every single day, in big ways and small, in challenges and triumphs, in ordinary moments and extraordinary ones. And that choice, made over and over again with intention and commitment, had built a life neither could have created alone. A life of purpose and passion, of family and legacy, of love that transformed everything it touched. It was more than either had dared to dream when they had met at that conference. More than they had hoped for during those early days of navigating the impossible complexity of loving someone they were supposed to compete against. But they had refused to accept that impossible meant never. They had fought for each other, for their relationship, for the future they wanted to build together. And in doing so, they had created something remarkable. A love story that was also a success story, a partnership that was both personal and professional, a life that honored both their individual dreams and their shared vision. Standing in the offices of Hudson Hartman Publishing, looking at the life they had built, Laura and Henry knew they had made the right choices. Every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt had led them here, to this perfect, improbable happiness. And they would not change a single thing,